In today's episode, you're going to hear why your mind sometimes lies to you, why your nervous system believes it, and how that single pattern quietly runs your life, even when things are actually going really well. Welcome back to the Mike Method Podcast. Today, I'm talking to Lynn Samida, a master level social worker, trauma specialist, international facilitator, and the founder of Expanding You. She's trained in NLP and she's developed a powerful process called Prime Potential, spending decades helping people reset their nervous systems so they can move from surviving to actually thriving. Here's why this conversation matters. Lynn makes a bold claim right off the top. You are already whole, complete, and worthy. But most of us were conditioned really early on to believe we have to earn love, belonging, and value. That conditioning becomes what she calls a constructed identity, the box we live in, built from family systems, early shame moments, and even well-intentioned be good messages. And then we spend adult striving, comparing, and achieving inside that box, wondering, why doesn't this feel like peace? In this episode, we unpack why comparison is a thief of joy and why even switching to me versus me can still keep you in the same box if the identity underneath is performance-based. How the mind actually lies to us, not because it's bad, but because its primary job is protection, not truth. Why the nervous system trumps the mind. You can have all the data that says we're safe, business is good, and still make scarcity-based decisions because your body remembers a recession. And I'll actually tell you my own personal story about that. Crosswiring before the age of 6, how something as small as getting yelled at in a pink party dress can wire, if I do what I really want to, I'll end up alone, and how that shows up 40 years later as self-sabotage. And Lynn's beautiful story about getting rear-ended recently in a car accident and responding with total calm and compassion. Proof that when we actually reset the system, presence is possible even in shock. If you've ever thought, I know better, so why do I still do this? This episode will give you language and a pathway forward. Let's dive in. Lynn, I really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to have this conversation.
So I've been thinking a lot. You and I had the wonderful opportunity to chat in advance and spend some time together and kind of landed on a question that I think would be the best way to start this conversation today. And it's this. So if you were able to whisper something in the ears of everyone on the planet, what would that be?
Well, such a great thing. I think what I would want to whisper in every person's ears that we are whole, complete, and this beautiful essence and being within ourselves. And that so many of us, certainly myself included, grow up thinking we have to earn our love and value and worth. And the truth is, it's really at the center of us. But the journey to come back to that and to be connected to that in a day-to-day way, in an ongoing way, that's the journey, I think, that we all go through as human beings.
So this concept of needing to earn love, that we need to be a certain way in the world, is that the concept?
Yeah, that's and it's embedded so early in all of our conditioning that there's certain ways to be and certain things to achieve. And it really sets us up for the striving, the efforting, and really points our eyes to the external world. How am I doing in comparison in relation to others and all of that? And then, of course, we get into patterns of, judging ourselves and comparing. And we go further and further away from that core essence. And then as we get into school and we get into jobs and we get into the world more and more fully, there's just so much data out there to compare ourselves with.
Early on in my career, I realized that comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
And what was happening for me is that because I'm an entrepreneur, I'm surrounded by entrepreneurs who are doing all sorts of different things. There's all these different metrics that I could compare. Is my company growing faster than theirs? Is mine growing slower than theirs? Is theirs bigger or smaller? Revenue, headcount, profitability. Like there's all these numbers that make stark comparisons between businesses. And it took me a really long time to recognize that my world around me is full of successful people. And yet that's not the yardstick that I need to measure by. I think the thing that took me a while to get to was it's me versus me. Right? Like, am I doing better than I was doing last week, for instance? or a month ago or a year ago? Am I making progress? And then I heard this lovely quote from Plato, which was never judge someone who's making progress, no matter how slow it is. And even in recognition of it's me versus me, I was judging myself based on these artificial belief patterns that I had created about where I should be in life, how much I should have created, goals that I had set, how fast it should, like how quickly I should get to these things. And so even when I got to the point of me versus me, I was still like I hadn't escaped it.
That's it. We often talk about this in the training I do and so on, like a box that we're living in,
Right.
and the walls are the beliefs, and the floor is those core experiences that really set us up for how whole do we actually feel? Because if you've had some losses and some traumas, what I discovered as I was working with people, primarily in that whole area of trauma, is that the identity was wrapped around the trauma and the loss, or if it was a disability or whatever, it became the am this, I'm a survivor, or I am whatever. And that is a constructed identity.
Mhm.
And it's built on all the experiences we have,
Right.
including successes, including failures, and so on. But it is not the authentic self of who we truly are. So, as you say, the me versus me, still in my head, I think, yeah, and you're still in that box.
Mhm.
And joy lives outside that box,
Right. Well, and it's a
as
box
does
I guess I've
peace.
artificially created too, right? Like nobody made that box for me. I've constructed it. I'm choosing to live within it. And I can expand, contract, or make the box go away whenever I want. The lack of, I guess, the challenge, I guess, would be, am I even aware that the box is there?
Yes. And in that way, that was a huge discovery for me, because the achieving and the milestones that you talked about, I did exactly that pattern. And I was checking things off and, getting the right education, then getting the great job, then marrying, then building a home, then having a son. It was like tick, tick, tick. I thought that was it. I thought that was the model. Those were the goals, and they would deliver this other thing called peace, joy, well being, and so on. It was much later when I saw, no, that's not going to deliver it. And often for many people, it's a crisis or it's pressure, enough pressure on the system that you start to see like a crack in the foundation. For me, it was separating and divorcing, which
Mhm.
was something I never dreamt I would do. It was just not my picture. And when you put that pressure on, in a sense, the self esteem, I suddenly saw my self esteem was so conditional. It was based on all those things. And when those things were threatened, then it can be the loss of a job, it could be bankruptcy, it could be an illness, loss of a limb or a breast, or any of those things challenge our whole sense of self.
Mhm.
And you start to see how it literally has been pieced together. So if it has, then it can crumble.
Mhm.
And that's the point. You can take any of those things, and suddenly the esteem doesn't feel solid. That was a real breakthrough for me with people when I saw that. And I realized we need something different than really just trying to improve the coping. We need a different way of looking at ourselves and looking out through our eyeballs at the world. Because you can imagine, if somebody's had quite a bit of trauma, they felt unsafe in the world. People have let them down. It
Mhm.
hasn't been fair, and
Mhm.
so on. All of that is inside as they look out. They don't see a world that's full of possibilities and wonderful and loving and kind. They're looking for danger. They're looking for things that could hurt them or disappoint them. And when we do look out of our eyeballs that way, we find that, as you know, like we find what we're looking for.
My experience of that has been, was called out by actually somebody that I worked with came to one day and she said, we're currently living in a place of abundance in the company and in where we're going with the company. And she said to me, but you are making decisions from a place of scarcity. And she's like,
What a shock.
yeah, it kind of hit me like she was right. And it hit me like a ton of bricks because, I think another way of saying that is she's like, we're all playing offense and you're playing defense and it's not working. You're the leader. And she's like, the situation's changed around us and everything's great. So why are you still making decisions from a scarcity place? And when I started to look at and start to think about what I was grateful for, like what we had created and the situation, I realized that I was still living in trauma of this is to do with the recession. So we'd come through
Yes.
the recession in 08, 09, paid off all the debt, had landed, four very significant brands. We were, call it in the poker terms, back in the chips, right? And yet I was still making day-to-day decisions for the business and strategically that was really playing defense, operating from a place of scarcity, of not enough. But that didn't match the reality. And that was a hard wake-up call for me at that moment.
You've just beautifully articulated how the mind operates, which is one of the things we've studied so intensely, is to really understand how is it that mind works when the data is around you, the success is there, but the mind is not including that data. And one of the shocks for me in my career was that the mind lies to us. And when I heard that, it was like, that can't be true. Like I believed in my mind, I trusted it. And I think
Yeah.
people trust their thoughts.
Yeah.
They believe them, but the mind lies. The reason it lies is because its primary objective is protection. So it's got all the data from the past filled with the data banks, and it's looking at all of that and saying, this is the way to be safe, Mike.
Yeah.
Remember that painful experience, the
Yeah.
recession and all of that. You don't want to feel that pain again. So it's saying, we're going to keep that on the computer screen so you don't forget what that felt like. And you're going to do behaviors to protect that you don't go there again. That's the whole system. And you can imagine other traumas. The screen gets very full of what the system is protecting. And the mind is like a CEO. It's going around saying, we've got these systems in place and
Mhm.
so on. We don't want these experiences. We don't want these failures. It does not want to change
Mhm.
in that way. And when you get a big wake up call like you did, it's a shock to the system, and you get to see the discrepancy between the outside world and what's been running on the inside. That is a really good example. Like, there you are now doing really well, and yet the system is not operating from that place, which was the second thing we learned is the nervous system trumps the mind.
Mm.
Your nervous system remembers how it felt to be worried, to be afraid, to be juggling things and trying to make it all work. It remembers that very clearly. So it's going to trump the mind. And people today talk about being triggered. So often that's what's happening, that there's stuff in the nervous system where they've been hurt,
Mhm.
discounted, whatever. The system is remembering. And so it goes into protection.
There's a wonderful book called The Body Keeps Score that talks
Yes.
about this embodiment of trauma. And then there's another book called When the Body Says No.
Yeah.
And both of them are effectively about embodied trauma and the nervous system holding on to these feelings. And it's led me to have two of my affirmations that I read to myself in the morning. And one is, my thoughts are not facts.
There you go. So without realizing it that the mind can lie.
Yeah, all the time, right? And then the other one is, well, what if it works out better than I expected? Because that sort of shifts my thought process. And I think the other thing I've had to recognize over time is that there's living in the present moment, there's living in the past, or living in the future. And if I'm spending too much time living in the future, then that can create anxiety because
Mhm.
my mind will create whatever scenarios it wants to create, whether or not they're true, who knows? I can genuinely say that almost everything I've ever worried about in life never actually transpired. Right. Then there's living in the present moment, which is just being aware of where my mind and body is and just feeling grounded and grateful for this present moment. And then there's living in the past, which can lead to replaying thoughts and things that have happened in the past, which then affect my present, which will then affect my future.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't like, I do believe that the only way to learn is to reflect on our experiences. But I think there's a point at which reflection becomes rumination and an endless loop. And when I catch myself playing out a scenario that happened 10 years ago, where, I wish it was different, or I wish I would have shown up different, or whatever the thing is, like, did I learn the lesson from that? Yes. Well, then why the hell am I thinking about it now? It's of zero use. And I actually have to tell my mind to stop, and I have to put something else into it.
Yes. And that's one of the real key components, is learning that we need to manage this mind that we each have. It is not something that can just run, because it'll do exactly what you said. It'll go back into the past and replay, or jump to the future and predict. And neither of those places is presence. And so when we're wanting to really create the life we want, we need to be able to be in the present. But that is no easy thing. If you think, when you say to your mind, I want to be present, and we take a breath and we just sort of feel, I just want to be here now. For so many people, then the mind still keeps running. It keeps going. And it's either going in the past, what I have to do in the near future, etc., etc., etc. The truth is, the mind does not know how to be present. That was a surprise to me. It does not. And when I tried to sit and just allow my mind to be in the present, it went squirrely. It was crazy. It was just, and I'd heard from Byron Katie, a brilliant woman. And when I was in a workshop with her, she said, when you're truly present, there are no more decisions to make. Mike, I couldn't even imagine that. I walked away from that workshop and I said, that's impossible. We're making thousands of decisions every day. How could that possibly be true? But like a great idea and many spiritual truths, you just kind of store them. And then now and again, they come back and you think, yes, could that be true? No more decisions, like put it back. Until one day I decided to use a principle that unless you've really tried something, you shouldn't be dismissing it, like that guideline. So sat my little self down and said, I'm going to see what happens.
Yeah.
If I can just be here in the present moment. And it was extraordinary. Like, it was right in the morning and I just put my feet on the floor. I'm sitting on the side of the bed. I'm not going to make any decisions. I'm just going to be here. And my mind is like, are you going to the bathroom? Are you getting water? And I just sat, hush, quiet, duh. And then a moment occurred and I'd stood up and I went, wow, no deciding to stand. I stood. And then I thought, where am I going? And it started again and I just stood. And then I moved and I caught the feeling of it. And I started to go with that flow. Mike, it was the most amazing day of flowing through. And my mind or system remembered things that I'd forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
That were brilliant. One was recording a tape for a fellow who'd had back surgery, and I promised to send him these tapes while he had to be flat on his back. I'd completely forgotten. And then suddenly I'm recording these tapes. I'm sending them. It was this magical day. And now here's the funny thing. Talk about sabotage and setting yourself up. I was leaving for Bogota, Colombia the next day. I had a list a mile long to get organized. I needed money from the bank because they don't like money that's crinkled and whatever. So this was the setup. Like, can you make no decisions and still be ready?
For travel.
Wow.
Yeah.
Exactly. Talk about my mind saying, this is impossible. There's no way. And by the end of that day, I was completely ready. And I had just had the most magical flowing day with all those beautiful synchronicities you hear about. People like Deepak have talked about them, Joe Dispenza, all of it. It was very, very special. So that showed me what was possible. But people often say to me, so is that how you live all the time?
That's not reasonable. I mean, it would be great if that was true. Tuesday was like that for me. So this week, my Tuesday was as the same as you just, or similar in nature to what you just described. I made a decision in the morning that I am going to allow myself to be in flow today, and I'm only going to work on things that have high leverage, and I'm going to let go of everything else. And I sat down to get my hair cut at like 4:30 or something that day, and the barber said to me, "How was your day?" And I realized at that point, I'm like, "Oh, it's been great. Actually, everything is kind of. I had a lot to do on Tuesday, but I wasn't feeling rushed. I got to everything on time. Everything just flowed nicely, and it just sort of like went all the way through until I went to bed, basically. And so, I treasure those days because I felt like it was in the present moment. I didn't feel rushed, and I had clarity of thought. I didn't forget anything that I needed to get done. I actually managed to accomplish some things that I didn't think I would have time to do. But because I had a clear mind, I realized, oh, actually, I'm downtown Vancouver. If I walk to everything, I can actually hit these other spots I need to hit on the way to my next thing. And I can actually get two things done I wanted to do tomorrow. But in my mind, I'm like, I can't get these things done today because I have all this stuff going on, exactly. Right. And so, yeah, that was my experience of it. And I so treasure those days.
And that, I think, is an acquired capacity.
Hmm.
I truly believe that that's the direction we're headed. When I talk about, I believe in us evolving, excuse me, there's transformation, but there's evolution. And I think that's evolution.
Yeah.
It's a different state of being. And so that's what I'm very excited about people discovering.
Hmm.
Because once you've had a day like that, you do want more of them. The system loves it. And talk about health. They're so good for us.
Hmm.
So, how do we get more of them? And what do we have to get out of the way in order to have that? And as I've said, one of the things for sure is the mind.
Well, and somebody actually said to me that they renamed their that sort of chatter that's going in the back of their mind as their itty bitty shitty committee, and they're like, I don't want the itty bitty shitty committee running my life. And Michael Singer in one of his books, I can't remember which one of
Yeah.
the two books, it's the one where he basically talks about his life story. But anyway, in Singer's book, he references actually coming up with a name for that voice so that you can be like, hey, Dave, enough. Like
Yeah.
enough, right? So that, and the reason he said you need that a name would be helpful. I mean, I can get when people would say, well, that feels like a multiple personality or schizophrenic. Like, no, it's not those things.
No.
The reason is he said, if you give it a name, whether it's the itty bitty shitty committee or you give it a physical name, I guess we could call it, Karen, since the current, use of the name Karen in our society. But anyway, so Dave, Karen, whatever you want to call it, he's like, it's now separate from you.
Yeah.
So now it's not you. It's this other thing that's talking to you, which, some people would say, okay, well, that's your ego that's stepping in and your ego is there to protect you. Actually, a lot of times your ego is there thinking it's protecting you. It's actually doing you harm. So I love those. I love that, whether it's calling it the itty bitty shit committee or coming up with a name and then just telling it like, no, I'm
Yeah.
not interested in that. And I don't believe in what you just said. So, cancel, delete.
That's the managing the mind that I'm talking about.
Okay.
And Michael did such a good job of articulating how his mind was talking. And
Yeah.
I think so many of us loved the first book. I think it was The Surrender Experiment, but
Yes,
whatever.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he just named it, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
When we can name something, as Siegel says, then you can start to tame it. Name it to tame it.
Right.
But for me, that took me into, if we're doing that, what if we could reset the whole system? Because what I discovered is that constructed identity is an operating system. It's like an operating system in your computer. So it's got all the metrics and all the benchmarks of everything from the past. I'd been working and trying to improve that, helping people get from sort of drowning to surviving, but I couldn't get them over the halfway mark to thriving. And so that was the big jump. What would it take to not just constantly be, efforting to feel okay? How do we get over that halfway point? And that took me really into the whole work of how you reset the nervous system, because a lot of people have their nervous system set at a level of hypervigilance.
Yeah.
They are on guard.
Right.
You can feel the anxiety in them, and the mind is tracking what could go wrong and so on. It's exhausting. And we discovered that you actually can reset the nervous system. So that was a very exciting piece of, first, could it be done? And then second, how do you reset the nervous system? When you do it, you discover that there's actually another way your whole system knows how to operate. You experienced it on that Tuesday,
Right.
that flow day. Some people experience it in nature. Some people experience it, they're listening rather to music or whatever, and they just get into that calm, relaxed place. So when people realize there's another way the nervous system can run, it opens the door to locking that in. And that's what I mean about when I say, if people could remember or re-remember who they truly are,
Mm.
which is the authentic self,
Right.
that system runs very differently than the constructed one that
Right.
the mind is in charge of and
Right.
the ego is in charge of. They're two different operating systems.
I want to go back to this work around, that Byron Katie has done, and it's actually called The Work.
Yeah.
And she's got a wonderful book, and then she actually even created an app for it. It's a very, I mean, it's probably one of the simplest processes or systems I've ever experienced for turning around a negative experience, emotion, or belief pattern, because it's 4 questions. I mean,
Yes.
now the questions require, but there are 4 questions. And, I think it's been around for a very long time, and
Yeah.
it's really stood the test of time.
Hmm.
With your experience in doing the work with Byron Katie, learning this process, what was your biggest kind of aha moment through that?
I think it really was that statement she made that if you're fully present, there's no more decisions to make.
Right.
Certainly, the discovery that the mind is lying,
Right.
because you start with whatever thought you have, and the first question is it true?
Yeah.
And is it absolutely true?
Right.
So now we're inching away from believing our thought is actually true and a fact.
Yeah.
We're inching away. And then she invites the imagination. Who would you be without that thought?
Right.
And we go into this possibility space
Yeah.
of how I could show up, what it could be like, etc. And then imagine how we would show up and so forth.
Hmm.
I think her work is brilliant for the part of the journey of managing the mind. The whole path that we outline is really to, from that place of managing the mind, then to get over to really resetting the whole system so that you are living from a place of safety,
Mm.
of wholeness. And Mike, I had a really interesting experience last week. I was in a car accident. I'd never been in one before. We're lined up at a red light, and this woman drove smack into the back of me, like at the speed she was driving. She
Oh,
didn't realize the cars were stopped.
yeah.
There was this massive bang. My car went, immediately gave me a command or a signal. It said, "Your car's been injured. Do you need an ambulance?" Which
Wow.
was so amazing that it came on. I was fine. My seatbelt had held me. I got out of the car. Well, her airbag had deployed and her whole front end was crashed in and my back end was. And so I just went over to her and she was crying and apologizing and so upset. And in that moment, I just reached out and held her.
Hmm.
And it was just the most natural thing to do. And I reassured her and I wasn't angry. Like there was no thought of what was she doing? Like she said, "Oh, I've just been so worried and I wasn't even thinking about driving." There was no thought in me around what she had done
Right.
or judgment or anything. And it's like, that's how we want to show up
Right.
in life. That means your nervous system has to feel safe.
Hmm.
And so that experience showed me how much work I'd done to really be in a place of safety at that foundational level. And I don't mean that it's always that way and so on, but when you do the work to really reset the system, It's very profound.
I'm sorry that that happened to you. I'm sorry that because it's car accidents are those things that the gifts that
Yep.
keep on giving because then you got to get your car fixed and on and
Yep.
on. I'm glad you're okay. Um,
Yeah.
I'm glad she's okay.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is that you looked at the situation from an objective perspective, which was I've been in a car accident. I'm okay, right? My car will get fixed. She's been in a car accident. I'm not sure if she's okay, but I'm going to go check, right? What you didn't add in was the subjective, which is she's negligent. It's her fault. How could she do this to me? This is going to be terrible for me because that's going to be such an inconvenience over the next
Yeah.
while I get all the things, right? Which are all these subjective thoughts that we choose to add to a situation versus the objective piece, which was like a car accident occurred. These two cars are damaged. I'm okay. I'm not sure if she's okay. That's literally all the facts that are true. Everything else, if you chose to, you could have added all these things on, but that would have affected your nervous system. It would have, your emotions, you would
Yeah.
have got even higher adrenaline spike than you probably had from being
Hmm.
rear-ended, right? So
Yeah.
none of which actually serves you well or changes the situation, makes it any better in any way, fixes the car any faster,
No.
has anything to do with any potential injury you have or she has. None of those things will shift, change, or be better or worse by you adding that subjectivity to it. That takes a clear presence of mind to be in the place that you were in.
And it was so affirming for me because often I think we need experiences to show us how far we've grown.
Right.
And it showed me I was so in my heart, like
Yeah.
I was felt so badly for her.
Yeah.
And, it just unfolded from that place with ease and grace. And, people have said to me, so are you working on being enlightened? Is that what your real goal is? Enlightenment. And the truth is, that's not mine.
Yeah.
Mine is to be this wonderful, open hearted, loving, caring person day to day.
Hmm.
That's the goal I have for myself, but for others as well. If we could have a planet of people who can be present, loving, open hearted, clear minded, as you said, what a different world we would have.
Yeah, I always think about this chasing enlightenment is like one, I'm not sure like it's possible to get there. And even if you were there, would you know? And from my experience, even when you've made a ton of progress, that just now gives you an awareness of what the next level is.
How much more there is.
Yeah, in a really positive way. And I even think about it for meditation, right? Like, there's a wonderful book by this woman named Farzana, and the book is called I Cheat at Meditation. And one of the things she says in the book is, hey, the goal of meditation is not to get better at meditation, is to get better at life. And, when I started meditating, which was, I don't know, like 17 years ago, something like that.
Mhm.
So I realized I was trying to get better at meditation. I was trying to chase this
Yeah.
Zen state. And I was, I had a lot of monkey mind going on. And
Yeah.
it took a long time. I started 5 minutes and that was pretty good. I felt better. And then 10, then 15, then 20. And then I just kind of worked my way up to, 40 minutes. And then it was an hour. And now it kind of floats anywhere between 15 minutes to an hour, depending on what I feel like and the time that I have decided to devote to it. But I would say that for a long time, the first 20 minutes of a 30-minute meditation was just complete monkey mind, a flood of thoughts. And I'm like, I suck at this. Like, I can't even stay. And then I read her book and I'm like, oh, okay. So the goal is to get better at life, and meditation is helping me. And actually the act of clearing my subconscious, like getting all these thoughts out of my brain so that I can reach sort of this peaceful state. And it may or may not happen this time that I meditate. I don't know. We'll see. But the times that I have, everything just goes quiet. And I
Mhm.
realize either I'm just thinking about counting, or I'm listening to my heartbeat, or I'm aware of my breathing, but there's nothing else there. It's just complete quiet. And that's such a rare thing to have happen, where I feel completely present. And I find that translating that into my day, it has to be a conscious choice to bring that level of awareness into my day. It's not like the meditation just instantly, I mean, it makes it easier to do now, but I have to choose it. I can't just like, I meditate, so therefore it's just directly going to just be there all the time. It's more like, well, I know how to get there and set up the conditions for that level of presence to occur.
Yeah.
And I might slip, which is fine, off that place, but it's a conscious choice.
Yeah, and I think it makes it easier when you've cleared some of the things in the nervous system.
Right.
I mentioned, how sabotage works.
Yeah.
When you've really wanted something and you've tried really hard, whether it's weight loss or whatever, and you're not making progress, there's what we call cross wiring in the nervous system. In other words, you may want to lose weight, but the nervous system perceives some kind of danger.
Right.
And more than just cognitive, when you can go into the system and discover what has got cross wired. And Mike, those cross wirings are mostly before the age of 6. So they're in way underneath in the subconscious.
Yeah.
I know we only have so much time, but I remember a woman coming to me and she said, you said if I really worked hard on something, and I've not made progress, maybe there's cross wiring.
Yeah.
And I said, yes. And so she said, well, can you tell me what's crossed? It was like as if it would be printed on her forehead. And I said, no, but I could take a few minutes with you and show you. And she said, oh my gosh, would you? And I said, sure. So I asked her, she wanted to lose weight. She was quite a large woman. And what would she get if she lost weight? And she said, oh, I'd have so much more energy. And I said, and what would be the best thing about that? Oh, Lynn, I could do so much more and so on. And I dug into that a little more. And she said, well, I could do what I want to do. I'd have enough energy for the things I want to do. And I said, beautiful. Now I'm going to ask you a crazy question. What's the worst thing that could happen if you do what you want to do? And she said, there's no worst. It would be wonderful. It's exactly what I want. And I said, no, your nervous system does not want that. And she said, really? And I said, so let me ask again. If your system was afraid of something, what do you think it might be if you do life just the way you want? And then she said, well, I guess some people might not like what I do or what I choose. And I said, okay. And if they don't like what you choose, what would be the worst about that? Well, then they wouldn't want to be around me. And I said, and what would be the worst of that? And Mike, she started to cry and she said, oh my God, I'm going to be all alone and I'm going to die destitute by myself.
Right.
How do we get from losing weight and being healthy to destitute and dying by yourself? They do not seem related, but they are.
Yeah.
So she said, well, how did that get hooked together? And I said, well, I can't tell you, but I said, it happens when we're young. And can you think of any experience when you were young where you did what you wanted to do and it didn't go well? And honestly, Mike, she knew instantly. She said, the pink party dress. And I said, okay. She said, I put it on and I was like a princess and I danced around and it was so wonderful. And this day I went outside and sat in a great big mud puddle and had a wonderful time. And Mom looked out the window, saw daughter, pink party dress covered in mud, raced out, whipped her out of the puddle, stripped off the dress, spanked her, and sent her to her room. And there she was, all alone, heartbroken, sobbing, and feeling like her world has fallen apart. The nervous system remembers. It is not going to let her go near doing what she wants to do if there's any chance she could end up feeling that abandoned, that alone, that desperate. So that kind of cross wiring we have to unhook.
Right.
It isn't logical, but the system has it locked in.
And when it's hardwired, before the age of 6.
Yeah.
Right. And
That's right.
and that cross wiring is it's basically just there day to day. Like it's
It is. Yeah.
It's operating everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So guess what she's doing to feel better? She's eating.
Right.
And she's doing everything for everybody else, hoping it'll be her turn. If
Right.
everybody else is finally happy, I'll get my turn
Right.
to do what I want.
Right.
But you never get there.
Right. That's just a road to nowhere. Like it to just
That's
gonna keep running down that road.
Yeah. So I think for a lot of people, there's those early experiences. They don't have to be capital T traumas.
Yeah.
They can be those kinds of things, but we know them when we can see we're not making the progress we want
Right.
in whatever area, like you said, you just tell your mind, no, we're not going there, and you move it in a different direction. That's not, you're able to manage your mind. She was not able
Hmm.
to resolve that. It had to get cleared.
I think it's, and I think it's an ongoing thing, right? Like I caught myself ruminating over something this morning and I'm like, this is dumb. Like, why am I thinking about this? And it was something that was like from 15 years ago. I can't remember how long ago it was, a long time ago. And I don't even remember why it came up into my mind. It just
Mhm.
popped up out of nowhere. And I realized I was thinking about this thing and it was a negative memory. And I'm like, I don't care, but like this is zero impact on my life. Right. And yet somehow it just popped up. And then I'm like, well, I'm not going to think about that anymore. That's yeah.
But
And so I stopped myself, but I was into it for a bit. Like, I don't know how long, maybe like 30 seconds or something, but enough that I'm kind of like, why am I even like, I don't know what triggered it. And I think that's part of the challenge is that the mind just throws these things out. And I'm like, where did that come from? Like, I don't know. I didn't read anything, see anything, hear anything, action, but something caused my mind to get triggered and then throw the thing out there.
and see, I would take a little different approach of
Yeah,
saying
please.
it's serving a purpose.
Okay.
So if we were to follow that,
Yeah.
okay, the mind has remembered this.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the best thing about remembering it?
Right. I think the best thing about remembering it is to see how far I've come from that moment and how values based the decision was at the time. And also what it led to has been so incredibly positive. And so that's the piece, which kind of grounds me in the present moment in terms of what's happening, the abundance that I'm experiencing at work and at home right
Okay. But let's pretend or assume
now.
that the system is trying to work something out. So it's popped up this negative. Good. It's, I'm going to say, wanting to clear something.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've just given the best thing about that is to remind me of the goodness and the abundance.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I want you to go further.
Okay.
What's the best thing when you remember the goodness and the abundance? What's the best thing about that?
I think that it's just calming, right? Like it's just a place of feeling calm, feeling presence, and feeling gratitude for this moment,
Mhm.
which is I think right now something that I feel like bounce between the future and the past a lot.
Okay, so hang on.
Sure.
Let's just see what your
Yeah.
system is. Yeah. So it wants you to be in touch with the gratitude and so on.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And just go with me now. And what's the best thing when you're really in touch with all the gratitude and the abundance and so on? What's the best thing about that for you?
I just feel relaxed and calm. I feel like I feel like I'm living in a state, I think, as one of my podcast guests, Anna Brooks, said, the ventral state, where I'm not
Mhm.
in a heightened state, but I'm not in a depressed state either.
Got
I'm
it.
just kind of in the middle. And it's a lovely, peaceful place to be.
Good. Now you get the crazy question. What's the worst thing that could happen when you're in this relaxed, lovely, grounded state?
I'm going to miss something.
Thank you. And if you miss something, what's the worst that could happen then?
Bad things will happen to the business.
That's right. And if bad things happen to the business, what's the worst thing about that for you?
Yeah, destitute.
You
Like
see?
it's a friend of mine. His phrase is he always feels like he's two steps away from being a bag lady. I know that terminology is not politically correct, but that's his
That's,
thought process. And
I absolutely get it.
yeah, and for me, that's it. It's like bad thing will happen, destitute. It's like a direct line for me.
Thank you. So, Mike, regardless of how much you know
Yeah,
about the state of gratitude and abundance,
yeah,
it is cross wired with
yeah,
if you relax enough,
yes,
you will miss something and
right.
something bad will happen. So, that will keep popping up because it is in at a deeper level. And when we get to that and uncross that, then the system can relax. You see, but otherwise, it's true. The system feels like it's one decision away from catastrophe or something bad happening or things falling apart. So that little thought is there as your friend showing you at a deeper level, this is cross wired and it's from a very early time when you couldn't process any of what we're talking about. But something happened when you were relaxed and just being the natural you that locked in the nervous system. And it's saying, you don't trust this really relaxed state. We're not fully. on board with it. So that's how the sabotage works.
Lynn, this has been an incredible conversation. I am so grateful for your time, and you've touched on something that's deeply important to me. So I appreciate the last exchange that we had back and forth. This is my work. This is
Yeah.
literally the work that I'm doing right now, and I'm grateful for you putting more depth to the work that I've done. Yeah, it's been an honor to be in conversation with you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. I've loved it.